The date is February 20th, 1978. The venue is Madison Square Garden, the historic heart of professional wrestling, and a profound sense of anxiety hangs in the air, thick and expectant. For nearly 10 months, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation Heavyweight Championship, the most prestigious prize in the territory, had been held in spectacular, flamboyant captivity by superstar Billy Graham. Graham, a magnificent heel, was a walking, talking distillation of the me generation, muscular, microphone-wielding, and utterly contemptuous of tradition. He was a glorious anti-hero, but to the thousands in the Garden and the entire Northeastern Territory, his reign had become an oppressive, decadent burden. The crowd craved not just a change of champion, but a restoration of virtue. They needed a savior to cleanse the sport of its growing excess. He emerged from the backstage area, Bob Backlund, looking less like a professional showman and more like a supremely conditioned All-American university athlete. He was the very definition of the babyface ideal, clean-cut, earnest, and technically brilliant. His offense was a throwback to the scientific precision of wrestling's past, featuring an exhausting array of dropkicks, bridges, and suplexes. This match was not merely for a title, it was a battle for the soul of the company. The two men engaged in an unforgettable clash of styles. Graham's raw, overwhelming power against Backlund's indefatigable endurance and scholarly technique. The climax came when Backlund, summoning every ounce of strength, hoisted Graham high into the air and dropped him to the canvas with emphatic finality. Graham collapsing beneath the impact as Backlund covered him for the dramatic, history-defining pinfall. The subsequent roar was a physical wave of sound, a collective, cathartic eruption of joy that signified the end of a long, decadent night. The young, new champion was crowned. The victory was glorious. Bob Backlund had not just won a championship, he had ushered in a new era. For the next 2,135 days, a reign surpassed only by the legendary Bruno Sammartino, Backlund would stand as the Iron Man of the Federation, carrying the banner of technical, credible wrestling across the world. He was the anchor, the steady, virtuous hero whose presence solidified the company during a tumultuous period of growth and cultural change. His long tenure would ultimately pave the way for the massive national expansion and the subsequent golden era that was just around the corner. When he held the championship, the world felt solid, grounded, and inherently just. Yet this monumental reign would end not with a grand defeat, but with a peculiar, ignominious whimper. The end came on December 26, 1983, orchestrated by the villainous Iron Sheik and sealed by the shocking, tearful betrayal of his own manager who threw in the towel. Within weeks, the championship was placed on the charismatic shoulders of Hulk Hogan, and the company exploded into the pop culture stratosphere. But here lies the fascinating historical anomaly, the essential piece of the puzzle that defines his bizarre downfall. The hero who never quit, the champion who was screwed out of his title, would soon vanish. He didn't launch a furious chase for revenge. He didn't remain the company's biggest babyface contender. He simply faded away, ultimately leaving the company less than a year after his title loss, only to reappear a full 8 years later. What cosmic disruption, what internal betrayal, or what stubborn refusal of destiny led to this unceremonious ejection? How does a champion who carried a company for 5 years become obsolete in a matter of months? To understand the downfall, we must first understand the man. Robert Louis Backlund was born in Princeton, Minnesota in 1949, and his destiny was forged not in the smoky arenas of professional wrestling, but on the disciplined mats of amateur sport. His collegiate career was an outstanding display of dedication, an All-American in both wrestling and football at Waldorf College, culminating in a Division II wrestling championship at North Dakota State University. He graduated with a degree in physical education, ensuring that the principles of athleticism, conditioning, and discipline were woven into his very identity. This deep-rooted commitment to technique was the foundation of his professional career, which began in 1973 under the tutelage of respected trainer Eddie Sharkey. Backlund's clean-cut aesthetic and relentless work ethic made him a natural, immediate face. He honed his skills in the tough, competitive territories of the National Wrestling Alliance, defeating the legendary Harley Race for the Missouri Heavyweight Championship in 1976. a significant victory that announced his arrival as a top-tier performer. His arrival in the Worldwide Wrestling Federation in late 1976 was the culmination of this journey. Managed by the veteran Arnold Skarland, Backlund quickly established himself as the premier technical performer, ascending to the championship with his aforementioned victory over superstar Billy Graham on February 20, 1978. Once champion, his reign was a staggering demonstration of durability. Backlund engaged in classic feuds that defined the territory. The dramatic heel turn of his tag team partner Peter Maivia in 1978, leading to a personal blood feud in the confines of a steel cage, and the long, grueling series of matches against the formidable Ken Patera, whom he feuded with on and off for 3 years. He was positioned as the undisputed master of the mat. The company's transition to the World Wrestling Federation in 1979 did not disrupt his dominance. Backlund continued to defeat all challengers, notably forming a brief, successful partnership with Pedro Morales to win the tag team titles in 1980. That same year, the first sign of the coming cultural storm appeared in the form of a young, powerful antagonist named Hulk Hogan. Backlund and Hogan met in a highly publicized series, and while Backlund would often win by countout, he could never secure the decisive pinfall. Hogan's electrifying, larger-than-life persona was a force that technical wrestling alone could not contain, giving the audience an early glimpse into the company's future direction. Backlund went on to repel the challenges of powerful, diverse antagonists like Sergeant Slaughter, Magnificent Muraco, and the returning superstar Billy Graham. His dramatic victory over Superfly Jimmy Snuka in the steel cage in 1982, where he moved at the last moment to avoid the infamous splash, showed a champion using cunning and experience to survive. But as 1983 began, the world of professional wrestling was changing faster than the champion. Vince McMahon Jr. was preparing his national expansion, a vision of sports entertainment that favored spectacle over substance. Backlund, who embodied integrity, suddenly looked outdated. The champion's own behavior began to reflect this disconnect. In the final months of his reign, he changed his image. He exchanged his popular hairstyle for a severe crew cut, opted for plain amateur wrestling singlets, and, most crucially, lost muscle mass and definition in an industry increasingly obsessed with physique. His earnest, clean-living persona began to grate on the audience, seeming more like a finger-wagging lecture than heroic sincerity. This howdy-doody character, a name first coined by the cynical manager, the Grand Wizard, was failing to connect with the burgeoning music television generation. The critics agreed, as in 1983, he was named the Wrestling Observer newsletter's most overrated wrestler. The cultural chasm was widening. McMahon's plan was simple. The title must go to the charismatic Hulk Hogan. The logical, most dramatic path was for Backlund to turn heel, to become the embittered anti-establishment champion, and lose the title directly to the company's new heroic face. Backlund refused. This was the singular, devastating decision rooted in his profound commitment to his identity. Backlund was the good guy. He would not, could not, betray the very virtues he had championed for 5 years. This created a profound business constraint for McMahon. He needed an intermediary, a transitional champion, who could take the title from the babyface Backlund and lose it to Hogan, all while preserving Backlund's integrity. Enter the Iron Sheik. The stage was set for Backlund's downfall on December 26, 1983. Backlund was compromised with a kayfabe arm injury sustained from the Sheik's Persian clubs. Locked in the excruciating camel clutch, Backlund was on the verge of agony, but he never submitted. The final poignant moment of the reign came when his manager, the man who had stood by him for years, tossed the towel into the ring. The champion was defeated not by a pinfall or submission, but by an act of misplaced compassion. The ultimate preservation of the hero's integrity, but the end of his era. The bizarre part of the story begins immediately after. The heroic victim, the most deserving contender, should have been the one to chase the Sheik. Instead, McMahon seized the moment. On January 23, 1984, the Sheik, having served his purpose, was defeated by Hulk Hogan. The company's focus, energy, and resources instantly pivoted to the magnetic charisma of Hulkamania. Backlund, having refused the heel turn, was left in a professional limbo. He could not realistically challenge the new, universally popular babyface champion. The narrative had moved on without him. The man who was the company's anchor for half a decade was quietly, quickly, and unceremoniously moved down the card. On August 4, 1984, he wrestled his final match in the company for 8 years. A victory over Salvatore Bellomo that passed without a trace of the historical significance it deserved. The champion who built the bridge to the golden era was uninvited from crossing it. His eventual return in 1992, after an 8-year absence, was a surreal culture shock. He came back the same man, preaching virtue, promoting conditioning, to a company now populated by rock stars, clowns, and monsters. He was an anachronism, a living museum exhibit who failed to connect with the new audience. It was this profound alienation, this ultimate failure to adapt, that finally shattered his rigid code. In the summer of 1994, after a loss to Bret Hart, the unyielding good guy finally snapped. He locked his opponent in the Crossface Chickenwing and screamed in an outburst of pure, raw psychosis. The heel turn he refused in 1983 was enacted on his own terms years later, the ultimate sacrifice of his sanity to regain relevance. This newly unhinged, eccentric Mr. Backlund briefly reclaimed his destiny, winning the championship at the 1994 Survivor Series in a brilliant Owen Hart-aided plot. But his glory was fleeting. His second reign lasted a mere 3 days, serving only to transition the title to the next generation's chosen force. At a house show in Madison Square Garden, the site of his greatest triumphs, he was utterly dismantled by Diesel in a humiliating 8 seconds. It was the final devastating end to the saga of Bob Backlund as champion. Bob Backlund's downfall was complete. His integrity exiled him. His compromise destroyed him. He sacrificed everything to stay pure, then sacrificed his sanity to stay relevant. Wrestling doesn't remember martyrs, it remembers champions. And Bob Backlund died so Hulk Hogan could be born.